Some communities of color in Texas have not bounced back since Hurricane Harvey back in 2017, like the historically African-American Houston community of Kashmere Gardens. The neighborhood is more vulnerable to frequent storms and flooding, but lacks common infrastructure like curbs and gutters found in nearby white communities. Kashmere Gardens and other communities of color rely on open ditches dating back to the 1930s for storm drainage. According to a federal probe, predominantly black and brown neighborhoods like Kashmere Gardens were excluded from state funding that would fix these types of drainage issues. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development found that Texas didn't allocate any of the $1 billion in federal funds it received to protect neighborhoods in Houston that flooded all the time, instead allowing white residents living in smaller towns to disproportionately benefit from this funding. The state denies discriminating and is appealing the department's findings. But joining me now to discuss this very frustrating story is Keith Downey, the president of the Kashmere Gardens neighborhood in Houston, Texas. So first of all, thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us about your community and what your community and other black communities in the area are like today. I mean, what are the consequences, not just of Hurricane Harvey, but of the other storms that you've had to deal with since then?
We've had 7 storms in the last 7 years. When Hurricane Harvey hit in 2017, quite a few of our residents were denied assistance from FEMA. As you'll see in the photograph there, that's 4 feet of water in the community. People lost their cars. Many lost their homes. And we're still fighting for what people use today, the word equity. Equity is thrown around. But unless you change policy and you stop the discrimination and you also stop the racism and you put back people's civil rights, people have a right to have their homes repaired. Don't find excuses where I find a reason that you don't meet the qualifications. So this is Kashmere is a community of 11,000 people. Northeast Houston has at least 150,000 residents, and many of them were just denied federal aid. So when residents hear about large pools of money, when you hear about $1 billion, when you hear about $300 million, people, they don't jump up and say, hallelujah. They say, well, the trickle-down effect, how is it going to get to us? And when you're sending it from the federal to the state is finding reasons why communities of color, especially black and brown communities, they just don't receive the funding that they need.
What are the resources that you guys do need right now? And what would that funding go to if it fairly went to the people who had applied for it?
Housing. People are getting their homes repaired in some cases. They're getting their homes replaced in some cases. But for every home that's repaired, there are a plethora of those that are still on a waiting list, whether it's with the state or with city funding. And so the fact of the matter is, there is in America, there is a struggle between urban versus rural. And a lot of times smaller counties feel that the larger cities are getting the funding and we're being treated as stepchildren. But the fact of the matter is, what they don't think about is the fact that inside of those urban municipalities, the fact of the matter is the minority communities are not receiving the funding that they deserve inside of those cities. So they're in the same boat as these rural communities. And so break down from the article that appeared in the Washington Post, many of these rural communities, the funding doesn't go to the poorer side of those small towns. It goes to the more affluent. And so people don't realize it's very expensive to be poor. And the fact of the matter is that people in underserved communities, marginalized communities, they're making hard life choices on a daily basis. I've met with Mr. Beto O'Rourke on several occasions, and we've had conversations. And I said something to him that resonated with him. The storm hit these communities long before the hurricane arrived. I even went to Lake Charles, Louisiana back in 2020 for 3 months in a row, October, November, January. I saw the discrimination in Lake Charles because northern Lake Charles, where the Black people live, it was a ghost town. You drive to the south side of Lake Charles, they were rebuilding and repairing their civic center and the businesses and what have you. So when you're dealing with funding, you have to make sure that funding gets to those who are actually is more equity there, that they are receiving the funds that they deserve. So what we need is housing. We need resources in our community. We appreciate Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee advocating and setting policy to get the funding out of Washington to the state, but the state has to understand that it must help all of its residents, not just those that are politically connected or counties with well-known politicians or what have you. So, you know, a lot of policy is political. And the fact that you have to take the politics out of it and put the humanitarian in it.
Keith Downey, it's really great to have you today on this really important issue. Please keep us updated on the status of that funding from the state government. We'd love to hear back if you have updates. Thank you again. Hi, I'm Zerlina Maxwell. Thanks for checking out our channel on YouTube. You can see more from Zerlina by clicking any of the videos on this screen, and make sure you subscribe below to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. Thanks for watching.